Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Cool Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. I've seen two types of movies. I'm not talking about good and bad, or sound and silent, or long and short, or foreign and domestic, or animated and live action. What I mean is I've seen movies in the theater and movies somewhere else. For me, experiencing a film on the big screen, no matter what it is, forever sets it apart. It's hard to explain, but seeing a movie as it was meant to be seen, in a place it was intended to be seen, is an almost sacred thing. Among my family and friends, it's a badge of honor to say you saw this or that movie in the theater, and an even bigger deal if you saw it there twice or thrice. Of course, I've only experienced theaters as a consumer, although I did spend one unsuccessful evening working a concession stand at a small theater many years ago. Today's guest has an insider's view, and it goes back 3 generations.
We're thrilled to chat with Greg Laemmle, president of Laemmle Theatres, a family-owned and operated art house theater company that he has operated in Los Angeles County since 1938. He's the subject of the 2022 documentary Laemmle Theatres, and is one of the few exhibitors with membership in the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Greg, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Happy to be here.
Laemmle Theatres began with your grandfather Max and his brother Kurt, who got their start in the movie business working for their first cousin Carl Laemmle, the legendary founder of Universal Studios. Carl Laemmle was famous not only for starting Universal, but also for saving relatives from Nazi Europe and employing them at Universal. Could you share a little bit about your family's history?
I mean, that's it. You know, Carl and my great-grandfather were both born in the village of Laupine, which is in southern Germany outside of Stuttgart. Several generations of the Laemmle family are from that town, and I've been lucky enough to go back and visit, and the Jewish cemetery is still there, and you know it's really meaningful to see that connection. Carl left Germany in the mid to late 19th century, made his way to the United States. He's a generation older than, many of the moguls that we talked about, the Louis B. Mayer and others. So he had been here in this country for 20 or 30 years before he found his way to Chicago one day and, famously saw a line of people outside a store and saw these people going into the store, leaving money at the store, and then leaving the store without anything that they're taking anything with them. That store was a Nickelodeon. And Carl decided that was a great business model and something that he wanted to do. And he immediately went into the business of running Nickelodeons.
I'm also the president of the Western States Jewish History Association, and we have an archive of really hundreds of historic photographs, one of which has Carl Laemmle on a horse on a ranch surrounded by cowboy actors and people that work at the stable and so forth. And I read in Neil Gabler's book, An Empire of Their Own, that Carl kind of saw himself as a cowboy in a way, like he resonated with those stories as kind of rags to riches tales, and he was a big fan of that genre, and really Universal Studios was known for predominantly putting out Westerns for a long run.
I think he hearkened to the idea of the West. He was the early, base for movie production was on the East Coast, actually in New Jersey. In many cases, they used, they wanted to be there because they would use actors from Broadway. Sometimes, on the assumption that, well, if they can act on stage, they can act on film. But he moved not just for one production, but moved the base of production to Hollywood when he acquired the property that is now Universal Studios. He also did that to get away from the clutches of Thomas Edison, who he was in a legal battle with at that time over the issue of whether Edison's patent on the movie making process was valid. And Carl ended up winning at the Supreme Court. Edison lost his patent over the movie making process, and that led to improved economics for movie making and, to the movie business as we know it today.
So in the documentary, Only in Theaters, a number of the critics and filmmakers talk about how inappropriate it is to see a movie like Lawrence of Arabia on an iPhone or Blade Runner on a laptop. Streaming these days, of course, is unavoidable, just as video rental stores were once ubiquitous. In your professional opinion, why do we still need theaters?
Well, we still need movie theaters because that's the best way to see a movie. And I don't know that too many people really argue with that. That's not that it's the most convenient or that it's the most cost, efficient, but it is the best way to see a movie. It's how movies are meant to be seen. And look, we've been dealing with it, whether you want to call it streaming or whatever. I mean, the movie business has been fighting with at-home entertainment for over 60, 70 years since the advent of television. And, it goes through stages but it's not dead and it's not dying and it's going to be around for a long time. And again, it really just comes back to, I think there is something to be said for the preeminence of that experience. What happens in the movie theater, aside from the fact that you've left your home, you've made that commitment, you're in a strange space with strangers, is also that you just don't have control. And you really need to give yourself over. And it I think, creates an awareness where you give yourself over to the storytelling and the storyteller. And that's just, that's a fundamental difference right there.
That's a great point. I mean, the suspension of disbelief, you suspend the suspension of disbelief when you press pause. I mean, there is something really powerful about that image that you're giving us.
It is storytelling, and it takes us back to being around the campfire and hearing someone spin these tales for us. And again, you're not the one telling the story. You're not the one in control of the narrative. And yeah, as you point out, absolutely, the suspension of disbelief that comes with giving yourself over to that experience is just a major part of really appreciating and taking in the story.
I'm wondering about walking out of theaters and if, how that plays a role in the theatrical experience. Because some of my most vivid experiences of seeing a movie has been actually walking out, and then you remember exactly what movie you walked out in or, walked out from, and that becomes a part of your own sort of cinematic self-story. There's something even powerful about that experience of hating a movie.
Whether it's hating a movie or let's say you really just need to go to the bathroom and now all of a sudden you're making this decision. Can I leave? What's a good point to leave? What am I going to miss when I come back? And look, movie going has changed. I mean, it was quite common back in the day to just wander into the theater whenever and start watching. Maybe, who knows what you missed.
So another theme of the documentary is how central Laemmle Theatres had been in bringing film culture or cinema in the elevated sense to Los Angeles. There was a moment when you almost sold the theaters and many worried that LA would become exclusively a place for mainstream movies. So how do theaters like yours enrich our society?
We like to support the little guy, and we like to create opportunities for films that are coming not just from smaller distributors, but in many cases directly from the filmmakers. We like to find ways for them to have an opportunity to be seen, good, bad, or indifferent. In many cases, it's still, someone put their soul into making this movie, and they want it to be seen with an audience, and they deserve to have that opportunity. So I think that's, what Laemmle Theatres brings to Los Angeles. And by virtue of the fact that Los Angeles is the filmmaking capital of the world, supposedly, or one of the filmmaking capitals of the world, that has an impact because there may be an agent, there may be another filmmaker, there may be a screenwriter, and they see something that they wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to see, and somehow that has a greater chance perhaps to influence the culture of the country because it can make its way into into Hollywood movie making. I saw at a film festival, John Woo's A Better Tomorrow, and fell in love with Hong Kong filmmaking of the mid to late 80s. And as I went into the business in the early 90s, one of the first things I did was try to find a way to start showing some of these films from Hong Kong, which had played in Los Angeles, but they played in, ethnic movie theaters in the San Gabriel Valley and, in too much smaller audience. And making those films available in West Los Angeles to an audience of people that were making movies, and then you start seeing that kind of influence make its way into Hollywood movies. You can't look at a film like The Matrix and not, say, this is a Hong Kong movie. It's the budgets have been amped up. Obviously, there's, maybe some deeper storytelling at work in the film, but stylistically, it's, a complete ripoff of some Hong Kong movies.
Yeah, my local theater is a Laemmle, and I've seen plenty of small and independent movies there, but that's also where I see mainstream blockbusters. Is this mix of small and big-time movies a new thing for the business, or maybe a strategy for keeping Laemmle Theatres going?
Yeah, look, as we move into a multiplex environment, away from that, classic image of an art house, which is that single screen theater in the bohemian neighborhood. Once you start saying, no, it's going to be a multiplex, it's going to have a lot of screens, you're going to have to play what's available. And in some cases, the best films or the films that people want to see are Hollywood movies. And certainly in the case of a theater like in Claremont, we're the only movie theater in Claremont. We have to serve the movie-going needs of that entire community, or that's our, mission in some cases. And people want to see all kinds of movies. They're going to want to see family films. They're going to want to see, horror films. We have to choose and curate how we do that on the limited number of screens we have, always making room for independent films and the art films that we're known for, but coming up with a blend that really satisfies, the movie-going needs of that entire community.
Your theaters play Fiddler on the Roof sing-alongs on Christmas Eve. How and when did that start?
Oh my God. We were celebrating, I think, our 70th anniversary. So we were doing some repertory programming, looking back at 70 years of film going, opening on the 25th of December. And so all of a sudden we kind of had a few days where we needed to experiment with some programming. And I had been a fan of the Sing-Along Sound of Music program, which I'd gone to see several times at the Hollywood Bowl. And I thought, Christmas Eve is available. Jews need something to do on Christmas Eve. Let's do a sing-along Fiddler on the Roof.
Have you heard from people who see that and then go eat Chinese food? Is that becoming a thing?
Not only do we hear from people who see the movie and go eat Chinese food, but we've, sometimes brought Chinese food trucks to the theater. Going back years, I remember commenting to my grandmother about Christmas Eve or, the holiday season and how nice it was. And my grandmother was, born in Russia. And she said, I hate this time of year. It still freaks me out because this is when the pogroms happened. And I thought, not that I want to, and so we can do something fun on Christmas Eve. And getting together to see Fiddler on the Roof is certainly qualifies for that. And by the way, plenty of non-Jewish people love coming out for it as well.
So back in 2003, you took a risk by screening Tommy Wiseau's now cult classic, The Room. How did that come about? Did you get to meet Tommy?
Tommy came into the office. He's really that guy. And said, I want to show my movie. And we came up with an arrangement for him to show his movie. Honestly, no one came for the most part. Obviously, some people, I shouldn't say no one. Not a lot of people came, but some people did come. And some people came up with the idea of this being, so good that it's bad. And they pushed Tommy to keep showing it and maybe transition from showing it, in a regular engagement where there's, 21 shows over the course of the week and there's not a lot of people, but do it as a midnight movie and make it a special kind of event. And the phenomena grew from there. And I take no credit other than, for providing him with the opportunity to show the movie and then transition from showing it as a regular engagement to a special engagement, and then turning that special engagement into a phenomenon. The midnight movie started having, 20 people and then 50 people, and then it sold out one auditorium. And, by the time we were done, it was selling out 5 auditoriums at the Sunset 5, for screenings, with lines completely around the center. And moving on to other markets. I'm not going to apologize to the world for giving him that opportunity. I'm not going to take necessarily credit for the success of it, but I will say, we wanted to give him the opportunity and found a way to do it. And then he found a way to make it successful.
Yeah, that's a remarkable story. And I think, that film and others like it, the really offbeat kind of culty films, it's just sometimes nice to see something that's different, even if it's, technically terrible, but it's enjoyable. Most theaters just go for the ticket selling things, and to hear the story of, it didn't do well at first, and then it kind of grew momentum, giving that room to the room, as it were. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Well, look, we've tried to do that with any number of other films. Sometimes it's that film that turns into a phenomenon. In other cases, there's a review of the film that, because we gave it an opportunity to screen in Los Angeles, and that allows somebody to make their next film. And the next film becomes a hit. So, again, I just keep coming back to it. It's trying to believe that films should have an opportunity, and that as much as people maybe think of our brand as being about quality films, we'll put quality with a small q, and in parentheses, because what the quality is about the experience. Did you have something that happened to you while you were watching the movie in that movie theater? And again, we don't want to be gatekeepers. It's not about, this film is not, up to our standards or something like that. It doesn't, represent our brand. Our brand is about, do you have an experience and a moment where you're watching that film that changes you in some way or informs your life? So, I think that can happen, even when it's a quote-unquote bad movie.
It's known that your family has a tradition of quoting Coen Brothers movies. We here at Amusing Jews are all huge fans of Coen Brothers. Is there anything in particular about their films that appeals to your family? Do you have a favorite Coen Brothers movie?
There are a number of Coen Brothers films that I love, some more than others. I remember going to the trade screening of The Big Lebowski. The Big Lebowski, of course, is very far from Fargo in terms of humor, and maybe in terms of, seriousness in some way, shape, or form. And I was just laughing my ass off at the trade screening. There weren't necessarily a ton of people, and no one else was, it's not like other people were not laughing. And I just couldn't quite understand why they weren't getting the film in the same way. So maybe that was a little bit of a Jewish connection right there. So we do spend a lot of time on Lebowski. We spend a lot of time, quoting Tropic Thunder. Definitely, a number of other films that the family shares, that we watches and loves to talk about.
Yeah, those two movies that you mentioned, and others like them. I think you alluded to this, and I wonder if you have any profound thoughts on the matter. But there's something Jewish. There's a Jewish je ne sais quoi, a sensibility in those movies, Tropic Thunder and Big Lebowski. I think general viewers might think that they're funny or quirky, but we kind of get something else out of it. It's hard to put into words.
So what defines Jewish humor? What defines, a Jewish response to things? And I guess, there's that, how soon is it, is it too soon to tell a joke? And I think, someone like Mel Brooks would say, it's never too soon. That's what helps us survive so much. Humor at some point is the tonic for tragedy. And sadly, there has been plenty of tragedy in Jewish life, and the ability to turn that tragedy not into pain, not into desire to revenge, but to turn it into humor. And in fact, in some cases, that humor becomes your revenge. against people, is that a particularly Jewish quality? No, of course not. Because if you look at the African-American experience in the United States and, how much pain and suffering has been inflicted on that community, and yet the volume of artistic expression, humor, music of all kinds that community has provided for us as well. Clearly, it's not specifically a Jewish thing, but is there, it is partially Jewish, I guess. Or maybe it's human. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. So I know it's difficult, maybe impossible to predict the future, but what might be the future of cinema and Laemmle Theatres in particular?
I think the future of moviegoing is relatively secure. I mean, we have gone through an experiment over the past few years with movie theaters, certainly in New York and Los Angeles being closed for a year, and many other parts of the country as well. But because New York and LA were closed, it impacted moviegoing across the country and arguably across the world. And then coming out of that experience, even when movie theaters reopened, we had spending all of 2021, experimenting with the day and date release of movies in theaters and on VOD. And at least from a financial standpoint, the results are in. And it did not work. It did not work for the studios to be able to do this. Having an exclusive theatrical window is important for the aesthetic life of a movie, and it's definitely important for the commercial life of a movie. And the audience has shown since that time that they want to see movies in movie theaters. If we're not, back to 100% of pre-pandemic box office, let's not forget where we're not seeing as many wide release films as we saw in the pre-pandemic period. There's still, some process of getting more movies into movie theaters. We've had to deal with several waves of continuing, COVID infection that I think are keeping a significant percentage of the audience from comfortably returning to movie theaters. And we just had a major dislocation. A significant percent of our audience, were regular moviegoers, and that's what brought them back each week, that regularity or that month, that they saw a trailer, that they saw a flyer, that they saw a poster. So we need to reacquire every one of those people. But I think overall moviegoing is shown that it's going to be, a part of the cultural and financial life of a movie, that people want to see movies in movie theaters. Now, is every movie theater going to survive this period? No. Some of them, when you're closed for a year, when you're at reduced box office for 2 and 3 years, sometimes you just can't make it. The numbers, whether it's rent or payroll or everything else, if they're based on 100% of pre-pandemic box office, and maybe you can squeeze by at 80% of pre-pandemic box office, but if you're at 75%, that location is going to close. In some cases, someone new will come in and take over that movie theater and reopen it. In some cases, whatever. We'll just see. I think commercial movie theaters right now some of them are actually doing a really great job playing art film. And I don't know that they're doing it out of any great affection for that type of film, but they have the screens. They have the ability to put some movies on screen, and audiences are showing up there. So let's applaud that. It's not necessarily good for me, but it is good for moviegoing. And at the end of the day, we will find our way, to keep our theaters open, if not all of them, some of them, or most of them. And I think moviegoing will continue. So I do predict a future for moviegoing.
Well, thanks so much, Greg, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.